Hello, and welcome back to the final part of our video series on data protection in research practice. In the last 3 videos, we had a look at the theoretical framework of data protection and the GDPR. As promised, this video will introduce you to the ELDAH Consent Form Wizard, so things are going to get a little more practice-oriented. But before we start working with the tool, we should first clarify some general information about the Consent Form Wizard and come up with an example scenario. Now, what is the ELDAH Consent Form Wizard? The ELDAH Consent Form Wizard was developed by the Dariah EU Working Group on Ethics and Legality in Digital Arts and Humanities. It is a support tool for humanities researchers within the European Union that allows the creation of valid consent forms for data processing within the context of their specific professional activity. The tool itself and the consent form that is created by it are based on the legal framework of the GDPR. However, it can also be used outside of the European legal and economic area, since the content is not only relevant for legally compliant, but also for ethically justifiable research. The tool is structured as a questionnaire, which guides you through all the necessary questions to create a GDPR-compliant consent form that is tailored to the respective data processing purpose. The final consent form is available as plain text and can either be used as a text template for a physical consent form, or it can be embedded in an online environment. But pay attention, the validity of the generated output depends on the truthfulness and accuracy of the input you provide. In some cases, the research purpose can be too specific for the tool to handle. In those cases, you may require additional legal advice. If your research purpose or the data you collect produce such a case, the tool will indicate that. Now we know what the tool is and what it can do. But we still need an example scenario. After all, a consent form should be created for a specific purpose, and not out of nothing. How about a scientific investigation into the use of the Consent Form Wizard in the scientific field, and all of that in the form of an online survey? For this investigation, we particularly want to know the following. At which institutions is the Consent Form Wizard already in use? What is the age of the average user? And what academic degree do they have? Now we have covered the general information and we have come up with an example scenario. And with that, I welcome you to the ELDAH Consent Form Wizard. You can access the Consent Form Wizard by visiting consent.dariah.eu. The first thing we see here is some general information about the Consent Form Wizard, what it can do and what it cannot do. Furthermore, we immediately receive a warning that the tool does not provide and cannot in any way replace formal legal advice, especially when it comes to very specific data protection issues. And, as already mentioned, in some cases the tool will indicate whether additional legal advice will be necessary. But let's begin with starting the wizard by clicking the Enter button. Here we have to choose between 3 scenarios in order to find the one that suits our individual research purpose. Since we are collecting data from living people for a scientific study, scenario 1 is best suited for our example. Also, we have already decided that we want to implement the study as an online survey. Depending on what is needed for your specific purpose, you can, of course, also select several implementation forms. Next, we have to specify the kind of data we want to collect. In our case, we are not really interested in the name or the IP address. What we need is age, title, and affiliation. Of course, we could simply select every available option, just in case, but that would certainly go against the principle of data minimization. Let's move on to the next section of the questionnaire, the sensitive data. In our case, we do not collect sensitive data. However, it would surely be interesting to know which of the scenarios is the most used. For this particular case, there is not really a fitting data category available, especially because it is by no means a form of personal data. But since we do ask for this information, we might as well include it in our consent form, in order to be overall transparent about our data processing. For such cases, you can use the field Other. The original purpose of this field is to be able to list more specific personal data categories such as hair or eye color, which are missing in the generic data categories section. Sensitive data categories, however, should not be covered in this field under any circumstances. In the next step, we are asked if we also collect third-party data. That is data about other persons than our actual survey participants. In our data collection example, we do not include third-party data. But if we were to collect that kind of data, the tool would guide us through additional questions, like whether that third-party person is identifiable, and also whether they are still alive. If we can answer all of these questions with yes, the Consent Form Wizard will block us from performing any further action, and it will recommend seeking additional legal advice. It does that to prevent us from moving too far into a very sensitive area in terms of data protection. But, as already mentioned, we do not need third-party data in our example, which means that we can proceed without any interruption. The next question is actually a bit of a control mechanism. We know that the Consent Form Wizard is specifically designed for data collection and processing for research purposes. Should someone want to use it for other purposes, they will be stopped here from proceeding any further. But since we are using the tool for its intended purpose, we can move on to the next question. Now we have to provide more detailed information about our research project, such as the name of the project, the research area, a short description, and the project website, or if there is no project website, the website address of our research institution. In addition to that, we have to provide information about ourselves. Since we are collecting and processing data on behalf of our research institution, we choose the second option. Now we have to fill in our name, the name of the institution, the address, and the email address. If our institution has a data protection officer, we also state the name and the email address of that person. Next, we have to specify for how long we will store the data. Since we do not know how long our study will take, we choose the option for as long as necessary for the fulfillment of the defined research purposes. If we know an exact date, for example because our project has a fixed duration, we could also choose the first option and give an exact date. Sometimes it may be sufficient to aim for a shorter data storage period, such as only for a few months, to reach an intermediate stage in a project. If you choose this option, you can specify the number of months needed for the data storage. You can also select the option indefinitely for an unlimited data storage duration. However, choosing this option will prevent you from proceeding any further. That is because unlimited storage is only possible if the data has been anonymized. As long as the data allows the identification of a person in any way, unlimited storage is not possible. This section, however, is particularly concerned about our data storage duration in a non-anonymized state. Following this, we have to specify whether we are going to share the data with someone and whether we will anonymize or pseudonymize it in the process. Let's say we share our data without anonymization or pseudonymization. If we were to encrypt the data, we would be able to proceed without any further action. But since we do not encrypt it, we have to specify with whom exactly we are going to share it. Of course, it goes without saying that open access is not an option when handling personal data. This is why the option of sharing with the general public will obviously give you a warning message. After all, the Consent Form Wizard is also supposed to help you learn something. Let's say we would share the data with colleagues at the same institution. This would be less of an issue since the data would stay in one place. If, however, we were to share the data with project partners at other institutions, we would have to provide the name of their institution and the country in which it is located. Actually, we would have to specify whether it is a country in the EU, a country that the EU sees as safe under data protection law, or some other country. Should it be the latter, you should definitely seek additional legal advice, because that would mean that you are moving on very thin ice when it comes to data protection. The Consent Form Wizard makes that very clear by giving you a particularly salient warning. In our case, we only share our data with colleagues that work at the same institution and in the same project. So let us skip this screaming warning message and the additional options that go along with it. In our case, this was the last step, which means that we are done and our consent form should be ready for inspection. If we now click the Continue button, we will be redirected to an overview of all our given answers. Here we can check whether our information is correct. If everything is the way it should be, we can click the Finish button, which will lead us to our completed consent form. As you can see, all of our given information has been embedded into the appropriate areas. By clicking on Download the raw text, we will receive our consent form in a raw text format. This way we can either embed it in an online environment or add it to our data collection after formatting it in a word processing program. If we were honest and accurate while filling out the questionnaire, we will have a GDPR-compliant consent form in our hands that fits our specific research purpose. With that, we have reached the end of the last part of our video series on data protection in research practice. With the help of these videos, you have gained knowledge about the GDPR's most important terms, its principles, the key roles defined in it, along with their rights and obligations, as well as the exemptions that were included in favor of science and research. Furthermore, you have learned how to use the ELDAH Consent Form Wizard to create consent forms for your specific research purpose. I hope that with these videos I was able to give you some insight into the topic of data protection in research practice. Thanks for watching.